We finished the seat, and we're now going to move on to actually assembling the chair. The first part of the assembly is what's called in chairmaker talk legging up. Legging up will complete the chair from the seat down. The result will be a stool. We're going to leg up in 4 steps. Each one of these is unique to chair making and therefore is going to require a fair amount of explanation. So I'm going to have to do some talking. And you'll notice that sometimes there's more explanation than there is actually woodworking. The legs on the chair radiate out from the seat. They form a base, that's a footprint that's actually wider than the seat. There are a number of reasons why the legs are canted outwards like this. The first is stability. When 2 wrestlers grapple with each other, they automatically spread their legs out to make it more difficult to be tipped over. The same thing occurs with the chair. By canting those legs outward, it makes the chair more stable, more difficult to tip over. When you sit in a chair, you produce racking forces. You're not like a sack of potatoes that sits still in the chair. You move, you squirm, you produce forces like this. If the legs formed a box, they would not be as resistant to those racking forces as is the pyramid that is produced by those 4 legs. Third reason is the chair's appearance. Imagine what that chair would look like if the legs were vertical. I don't need to say any more about that. The fourth reason has to do with comfort, and that's going to require us to take a moment and talk about the physical act of sitting in a chair. Let me draw a chair. We have a guy sitting in the chair. You can see from his expression, he's unhappy. Why is he unhappy? Because he's uncomfortable. And he's uncomfortable because this chair has him in a position that the human body does not like. His knees and his hips are at right angles, and above all, his back is erect. Most of the weight in a human body is in the torso. And if your torso is erect for a period of time, your back begins to ache. And that's what's happening to this guy. His back is aching and he's unhappy. Now, just as an aside, you may recognize this chair. It's a shaker chair. The greatest public relations coup in the history of the world was the Shakers convincing the rest of us that they make great chairs. They don't. They were backbreakers. Let's talk about how the human body likes to sit and the differences with a Windsor chair. The human body prefers a surface that is slightly higher in the front than in the back. And then a back on a chair that's greater than 90 degrees. In this position, the guy's comfortable. Why is he comfortable? Because his body is open. His legs are not at right angles and his hips are not at right angles. And above all, the weight of his torso is being borne by the back of the chair. So he's in a more comfortable position. He likes that. Now, you recognize this position because if you get into your car and you adjust your seat, that's the position you choose for yourself. If you're up on a ski lift on a chair that is suspended, that chair will balance in this position. So it is the most comfortable position for the human body. Now, our happy guy here is a classic case of ignorance is bliss. He's happy, but it's because he's ignorant of the danger he's in. What is the danger? He's off balance. If he starts to go backwards, he cannot catch himself. He's going to break his neck. How do we prevent him from going backwards? By taking and angling the rear leg of the chair back sufficiently that the pivot point, the point on which that chair would have to tip, is behind the sitter's center of gravity. Now, the only way that this guy can tip that chair over is to consciously push himself up onto the rear legs. And he wouldn't do that because his mother taught him not to. Now, it's not necessary, nor is it desirable, for the front legs to cant out as much as the rear leg. If they do, anybody passing by the chair is going to be tripping on them. So it makes better sense to have the front leg with less cant than the rear leg. Now, we've got ourselves into a bit of a pickle here. We're talking about the way that legs are going one way or in all different ways, and we're not going to be able to talk with each other and make sense unless we start naming some of these angles. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're talking about the way angles, we're talking about compound angles, angles that are set in two planes. Each leg has two angles. We're not going to be able to talk to each other unless we name these angles. So what I'm going to do is set myself up on the short axis of that oval seat, which just happens to also be the center line of the chair. When I do, I'm looking at these two angles right here. They're symmetrical, so they vary from this plane the same number of degrees. We're going to name that angle, those angles, splay. So the front legs each have an angle of splay. It's the same number of degrees. The rear legs too have splay, and once again, they have the same number of degrees, although not necessarily the same as the front. So both front legs and rear legs have splay. They are seen by putting your eye on that plane and looking at the chair from the front. If I turn the chair and I put my eye on the oval seat's long axis, I'm seeing these angles here. We're going to name these angles rake and splay. I'm sorry. We're going to name these angles rake. Now you remember from the happy guy that there is a distinct rear rake angle and a distinct front rake angle. They are not the same. So when you look at the side of the chair, there is no symmetry in rake. When you look at the front of the chair, there is symmetry with splay. In order to drill a hole at a compound angle, you need two pieces of information. The first is the number of degrees. The second is a sight line. I'm going to explain a sight line by illustrating it. Here is a bevel square set up to drill a splay angle, but there's no rake established by it. In order to create a rake in a front leg, I would have to turn the bevel like this, which rotates the leg forward while maintaining its splay. Notice that the handle is now pointing at a different location. Let me do that again. Think of the line in the handle. It's pointing at a different location. In order to drill a hole at a compound angle, we need to know that location. The information we need, the number of degrees and the sight line for each hole is on the template. You can obtain the template by downloading it from the website. Right now, we're about to drill 6 through holes in the seat. A through hole is a hole that's open both at the top and at the bottom. There are 6 of them, the 4 legs and the 2 stumps. Those are the ones that we're interested in right now. And that information is on this half of the template. So the through holes here are only on this side. On this side is the information for the back. They're not all lines are included on the template because it would make it so confusing that you might make a mistake. But that's why numbers of degrees and sight lines. I'm going to now transfer the information, the hole locations from the template onto the seat. I'll align this line here on both ends with the grooves. When I do that, I should see the center line through this hole, and I do. And I'll just do one last test to make sure that I'm not cattywampus on the seat blank, and I'm ready to go. Now, we're only going to drill 6 holes, but I'm going to lay out all of the holes in the seat right now because we're all set up for it, and it's more efficient to do it now than return and do it later on. And I'm just making a pencil point. Now, there's one other piece of information I need to take off of here. I'm going to reestablish the pommel, which is the end of this center line right here. And so I just make a tick mark there so I have it. And now I can remove the template. The problem with a pencil point is it can be confused with a speck of dust. I'm going to make them into X's to make them more clear and visible for me. Most of the mistakes you make in woodworking are not caused by inability, but rather by confusion. And so a lot of the little tips that I will give you in the process of making the chair are to avoid confusion, and this is one of them. Now, I need to draw the center line, and I will do that with a flexible straight edge. This is just an aluminum strip. You can buy it at a hardware store, but the good thing about it is that it bends down and allows you to trace that center line. Before we begin, we need to talk about chair maker angles because they're different than what you may be used to. In most of woodworking, that is 90 degrees. In a chair shop, it's 0 degrees. And then the number on the template is the number of degrees of variation from 0 along the sight line. Why do we do this? Because we want to work with the smallest numbers possible. A draftsman would probably show this as 107 degrees. The problem is that I can't envision 107 degrees. I can envision 17. I can tell you that 17 degrees is somewhere about like that. If in setting my bevel square I've made a mistake, or I bang the bevel square and change its setting, the ability to envision an angle and say, no, that's not right, will save you from doing something that is irreversible. And so we work with the smallest possible numbers. To locate the sight lines, I measure to that point of intersection from the pommel. And when I do, it looks like it's 8 5/8 inches. And I'll just transfer that to the seat. And then I connect the two dots. I'll do it on both sides. Now we have the rear legs. Again, I measure from the pommel to that point of intersection, and I get 3 1/2 inches. And once again, I'll connect the dots. The sight line for the stump, I'm not going to trace because it's going to run across the platform and I don't want to have to remove it later on. So I'll show you how we deal with that in a bit. All the holes in the seat, both the through and the blinds, are 9/16. And so this is a 9/16 brad point bit. And the reason I like to use a brad point is that it has a very short lead on it, and it allows me to change an angle if I have to make a decision or any alterations in the process. Okay, we're going to start with the front legs. It says that on the template that those are 16 degrees. I'm going to use a bevel board that was made specifically for the sack back. The great thing about this is that it only has the angles used in a sack back. There's 16 degrees. Now I've set the bevel in what we call the closed position. In a chair shop, we don't have any angles over 90 degrees. So the bevel is either closed or open. And whether you use it in a closed position or an open position is merely convenience. It's dictated by convenience only. The angles were calculated from a flat surface, so I need to establish a flat surface from which to work. The framing square will provide that for me. I'm going to set the bevel on there like that. In order to drill a hole using sight lines, I have 3 considerations. The first is that the bevel has to be parallel to that sight line. And what I do is I look at the slot in the handle and I can set it up so that I'm parallel. The second is the cordless has to be in a plane with that line. I don't want to be doing this. The third relationship is the bit has to be parallel to the edge of the bevel. If I have those 3 relationships, I'll be able to drill a hole at 16 degrees that will give me my rake, my splay, and my rake. Now, if you have a buddy, another pair of eyes is helpful to sight for you. If you're doing this by yourself, there's no reason to get into anything silly like a mirror. It's as simple as this. Now that was so easy, You may have missed it, so I'll do it again. Watch carefully. Take the setup. Again, parallel to the sight line. Cordless in a plane with the sight line, and bit parallel to the blade of the bevel square. And like I say, it's as easy as doing that. Those are the two front legs. Next, we drill the rear leg holes. The template tells us those are at 24 degrees. This time I'm going to set the bevel in the open position because I can take advantage of the platform. What will be different now is instead of being parallel to the sight line, I'm simply going to use the slot in the handle to extend the sight line out behind the seat. Everything else remains the same. Second hole, same as the first. And the remaining two holes are for the stumps. Now, this is the problem. The point of intersection with the center line occurs out here behind the seat, and I have nothing out here to refer to. So instead, I'll make note that the center line passes pretty much through the middle of those two holes right there at 17 degrees. Once again, I'm going to set the bevel in the open position. I pull the backboard out to back up that hole. And I can place this angle iron so that it passes between those two holes, serving as a holder for the bevel square. Again, pull the backboard out to back up that hole. There we go. We're done with the first step in legging up our chair. We've drilled the 6 holes, the 6 through holes. Thank you for watching this content. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And check back frequently for more Windsor chair making tips and tutorials.